G'day, Andrew Derbidge here. I'm the chairman of the SMWS Whisky Society here in Australia, and I'm here today to talk to you about this fantastic bottle, Cask 13.109, thick and fast Frills. It is a spectacular bottle. It's my pleasure to talk to you about it today because this distillery actually holds a slightly special space in my heart because I actually worked at this distillery. Now, I'm making that sound a bit more glamorous than it really was. I actually spent a day's work experience there. So I spent the morning working in the brew house, doing the mashing and the brewing, and then the afternoon in the still house. And it's an incredible distillery. We might come on to that in just a moment. But let's look at the basic credentials of this fantastic whiskey. 13.109, thick and fast Frills. So it's 11 years old, and it's a whiskey that's been finished or extra matured. In this case, 11 years old, but 8 years originally in a first fill ex-bourbon cask, and then 3 years in a first fill ex-Pedro Jimenez sherry cask. So some people might argue that's the best of both worlds. 8 years of decent maturation in the first fill bourbon cask, and you'd expect to get the very typical bourbon cask maturation notes out of that. So vanilla, pineapple, tropical fruit, caramel, those sorts of flavors. And then 3 years in a first fill Pedro Jimenez sherry cask. And from there you get the rich dried fruits, the tannins, the sultanas, raisins, those sorts of things. And so not surprisingly, with that 3-year finish in the ex-sherry cask, this comes into our deep, rich and dried fruits flavor profile, which is, I know a lot of people like. So I'm going to pop the top off this because I haven't done that yet. We should give that a go. And while I'm doing this, we might just show you a couple of photos of the distillery. And there's a few here that I took when I was there back in 2011. That was when I spent my little day working there. And we've no doubt got some others on file, which we'll bring up and show as well. Ready for the moment? Oh, it's a good one. And not surprisingly, with some sherry cask influence, you would expect a decent color there. And look at that against my vaguely white shirt. That is fantastic. So it's an interesting distillery. It was actually founded back in 1839, so getting close to 200 years old now. And since 1960, it's been in the hands of White & Mackay. White & Mackay, obviously the well-known Scottish blenders and branded blends. And White & Mackay own a number of other distilleries as well. So this one's stablemates include the likes of Jura, Tamnavulin, and Fetterken. Let's just have a nose to get this session started. Wow. It's actually what I said before. There's a little bit of everything in there. There's certainly the tropical fruits from the bourbon cask, and then those rich, spicy, raisiny notes from the sherry cask influence. Now it's actually 58.6% alcohol. There's not a lot of nose prickle there. There's a little bit of heat, so there's enough to let you know that it's a cask strength expression. And, having spent 11 years in the bottle, I always think you should give these things some time. You'll notice I'm swirling. Not everyone's a fan of that, but it just helps to agitate and help the oxygen get in there. Blows off some of the volatiles. And that is a very, very pleasant whiskey to nose, I have to say. Lovely toffee notes there as well. So I'll taste it in just a moment, but as I say, it's an incredible distillery, unlike too many others. In fact, if you were to read the textbook on how to set up a distillery and run your still house, this distillery is like nothing else. It is a madhouse. So many unique features. The first thing you notice when you go in there is that all the wash stills actually have flat tops. And no one really knows the reason for this. The thinking is that back in the days when it was a much smaller still house, they brought the stills in and there was a clash with the roof. And so they couldn't have the traditional neck and line arm. And so they just simply cut them off to fit in under the ceiling and put that flat top on it. And obviously now there's been expansions and changes over the years so that we've now got a much higher roof, but they've kept that tradition of the wash stills having their flat tops cut off. Which looks very unusual. You don't see that in too many places. And then the other unique thing is that the spirit stills actually have water jackets or cooling jackets. And again, it's a function of back in the days when it was in a much smaller still house and the roof was in the way. So instead of having the traditional long, tall line arm that would help encourage reflux and the like, what they did was they fitted water jackets to the stills, and they just basically spray water on it. And the water, obviously, as the distillate comes up The still, it cools rapidly because of the cold water being sprayed around the outside, that jacket, and that encourages reflux, I should say. And the distillate condenses, falls back down, and a lot of reflux. And there's a lot of people that say, well, the industry believes that that's what encourages and contributes to the really fruity profile that this distillery is famous for. Wow, okay, let's have a taste. Man, probably not the most riveting television to watch while someone's just actually savouring a dram and not speaking, but wow. This is one of those great whiskies where there's a huge finish. You know, it's all about the nose, it's all about the palate, and there's so much going on, and then you swallow, and there's this second wave of flavours comes about 5-6 seconds after that. And you can probably just tell from the sound of my voice, I'm salivating. That has really got the mouth juices flowing. Big whiskey, huge flavours, but not bombastic, not nasty, just wonderful, rich, big flavours. But again, there's now a third wave of a finish coming. And it's finishing actually with some honey notes. I'll have to go back and taste this a few times just to get each of those little sequences there. And if you end up with a bottle of this, I encourage you to take your time with it. But first thing on the palate, it was very... not a sherry monster or a sherry bomb, it wasn't in the style of a big first fill, Glenfarclas or something that spent, 12 or 15 years in a sherry cask. But certainly you get those lovely spice notes, Christmas cake, Christmas pudding, those sorts of flavours. Let's go back and now get the second wave. Sweet gingerbread, toffee, more caramel. And then comes that second wave again. And possibly more savoury. There's soup mix in there. Some lovely spice, a touch of cinnamon. So much going on. That's an incredible whiskey. And wait for it. Here comes the third wave. Again, I know this is rinse and repeat, but I'm just amazed. I'm tasting this for the first time, by the way. You just saw me pop the cork. There was no pre-rehearsal here. I'm just going straight off the bat as I experience it. And man, what a whiskey. So complex, so much going on. And once you've tasted the whiskey, go back to the nose. And oh man. Again, now there's a slightly savoury note to it more. Lovely stuff. So yeah, look, I spent a day working at the distillery back, it was 2011, and spent the morning in the brew house there, and basically putting the yeast in. We had the one mash tun at the time. I think if I remember correctly, it was a 4-hour mash. I'd have to check my notes on that to find that out and confirm. And at the time I was there, they were actually just building a new visitor centre. Now, they've just been in the process of a huge expansion this year. I don't think it's finished yet. Last I heard it was due for completion towards the end of this year. And here we are in November, so not far to go. But they were actually increasing their capacity to 9 million litres per annum. So big distillery these days. But yeah, there was a fantastic morning spent there. And to keep on your toes, we weren't just sitting around watching things ferment in the mash tun there, or the washback, I should say. It was a really fascinating morning. And then on to the still house, where I was there for 4.5 hours and still couldn't work out how things were going on. There's unlike so many other distilleries, they're not, the stills aren't in matched pairs. Nothing is the same size. So, the wash stills are two different sizes. The spirit stills are different sizes. So the guy who's behind the control panel is just having to be on the ball all the time as this still finishes before that one, getting that one to go into this, go into the receiver to feed the next one, everything out of sync and balance. It really was incredible, and not a computer in sight. Everything was just being done by hand. So look, it's an interesting distillery. It's certainly an interesting brand. You'll find this at good stockers of good whiskey. It's a distillery that probably started to get a reputation for its quite expensive and rare whiskies. They put a bit out on the market there. I was very privileged many years ago to try the 1962 from this, which actually Richard Patterson poured out for me. And that really was a treat. So this distillery does make some amazing whiskies, probably famed for its sherry maturation. And you just get a touch of this right here. So fantastic whiskey. 13.109. This is going to be available in the end of the first week of December. We're doing our staggered releases coming up for this Christmas. So that's the plan. I can commend this one to you. You know what? I think I've just sorted out what I'm buying for myself for Christmas. This will be a great whiskey. Check it out, and we'll talk again soon. Bye for now.